Switzerland is the most innovative economy in the world, according to the Global Innovation Index. A vibrant startup ecosystem drives that innovation further. Now, capital is a key ingredient in supporting the development of these young companies. So, how do they finance their businesses? Welcome to finance.swiss. I'm Tanya König, and today I'm speaking with Lukas Reinhardt, Head of Growth Advisory at UBS, to find out more. Lukas, why has Switzerland such a vibrant startup ecosystem?
It has to do with the innovation that happens here in Switzerland. Switzerland is leading in innovation. As you mentioned in your introduction, Switzerland was voted the most innovative country in the Global Innovation Index for the 13th consecutive year. So that's definitely an achievement. Why does that happen? It has to do with our educational system and with the amount of money that is actually put to work in R&D. Switzerland has the highest spending in R&D per capita worldwide, and our technical universities, particularly like the ETH in Zurich or the EPF in Lausanne, are world-class institutions that create innovation in a steady flow. About 50 to 60 spin-offs every year come out of only those two universities, and many more out of the other universities. All this innovation is looking for financing, and that's one key part why the startup ecosystem is so vibrant.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds quite exceptional. How does it compare to other regions in the world?
As mentioned, Switzerland is very strong in creating this innovation. So if you measure that by patents, for example, that are created, they're world class. They're really leading also within Europe. When you compare how much venture capital is invested in Switzerland, we are on a good average compared to other European countries, at about 0.1% of the GDP every year. If you look at other countries like Israel and the US, for example, that metric is 3 to 4 times higher though. So having said that, there's definitely still room for improvement, but we're on a very good level.
So the ideas are here and the money then just comes from outside?
Yes, for a large part it comes from outside today, but there is money here domestically, as we know, so I think it's about the structures and how to funnel that money into the right direction.
Then venture capital funds are at the forefront of financing early stage startup companies. What does the market structure look like in that space?
Yes, on average, I would say 20 to 25% of the venture capital is actually coming from Swiss funds here in Switzerland. About a third comes from the US. This has to do with the fact that the large US venture capital funds usually step in a later stage where larger volumes are deployed. So that, of course, influences that statistic. And the other roughly 50% then comes out of the UK, France, and other developed economies mainly.
Mm-hmm. And what do they look for?
They're looking for our world-class innovation, for deep tech companies, particularly because it's well known by now, also worldwide, that Switzerland is leading. And venture capital funds noticed that in the past couple of years, more and more capital actually came in from the outside to Switzerland to finance that.
And then banks, they step in a bit later in a life cycle of a startup, of a young company. When and why?
We would step in usually in a later stage, so in the growth stage of a company. Growth stage defined by revenue generation, even better visibility towards break-even. This is where banks feel more comfortable with in terms of like analyzing a business case. Early stage startups is very difficult to analyze them. That's why venture capital funds that invest in the seed stage or early stage of a company usually have very deep expertise in a certain technology, because what you do at that stage is really to invest in a team, in an idea or a technology. So this is not particularly where banks have the necessary capabilities.
But as a bank, do you already look out for future opportunities, like looking at early stage startups, thinking about financing them later on?
Definitely. So we usually engage very early on with the companies, even if we cannot provide financing yet, because of course we want to see how those companies develop over time and see how they commercialize and how they scale up in order to actually be able to assess a certain business model and a company. Yeah.
what other initiatives are there in Switzerland that are worth mentioning that nurture that ecosystem?
We have a couple of initiatives here in Switzerland. One initiative targeted at R&D spending is the Technology Fund. So this is a scheme set up by the federal government to support clean tech innovation. So how it actually works is you get a guarantee from the federal government to finance a company, the company's R&D. So banks, of course, then lend to those companies based on those guarantees. Other initiatives that are well known is the Swiss Economic Forum. So within the Swiss Economic Forum, there's a program called SEF Growth that is more targeted at the growth stage of companies. And there's many more, like the Swiss Entrepreneurs Fund, for example, that was set up a couple of years ago and invested already 250 million into the Swiss startup environment.
And Switzerland is a leading offshore wealth manager. What are the advantages when it comes to venture capital investments?
It definitely helps, right? We have a lot of private investors investing in startups here in Switzerland. So a statistic from like 2021 estimated around 60% of the rounds are also invested by private investors directly, which is definitely above average internationally. So that has to do with the fact that there's a lot of private wealth here in this country. We have a lot of family offices located here that do invest in venture capital. So that definitely helps to nurture the ecosystem.
Great, Lukas Reinhardt, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.